Hello and welcome to episode 34B of the Australian Roundtable Podcast on Sunday, the 31st of May 2015. I'm your host, John LeBon, and I'm joined via Google Hangout by Ethan Nash of TOTT News. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here, Johnno.
And we're fortunate enough to again have with us via Google Hangout our resident wise old elder, the silver fox himself, Lindsay. Thanks for joining us. That just happens far too often. We're going to have to find
Lindsay
a new system.
Did it again.
No, that's all right. Thanks for having me. I'm going senile. I just forgot to turn the mic back on.
That's all right, mate. That happens now. I've edited this one down, so this won't be too long, but just bear with me here. For new listeners, the ARP is a Brisbane-based independent news analysis discussion roundtable, which broadcasts live every Sunday from 3 p.m. AEST. Live listeners can take part in the live chat forum at the YouTube channel during broadcasts, and there are already quite a few people there now, so hello to all of you. All episodes are archived at that channel and are also available for download in MP3 format for free from our website, ozroundtable.com. Views presented by individual panelists and guests are not necessarily representative of the entire panel, and all important information cited during the broadcast will be linked to at our website, ozroundtable.com, so you can verify and analyse it for yourself, which we always recommend you do. Episodes generally run 2 hours, and I'll get to the rundown for today right now. First off, we'll take a look at the news like we always do and have a bit of a laugh, and then in the domestic segment, we've got 8 topics today. I'll run through them very quickly. More medical breakthroughs, school kids trained to spot the jihadis, Abbott's war on radicalisation, Queensland police officers dropping like flies due to apparent corruption, corporate media promoting RFID chips, that's a feature piece from Ethan, I'm looking forward to that, moves towards a cashless society, the Reserve Bank of Australia warning borrowers that we have too much debt, and finally a public backlash against foreign investment is finally starting to grow. Then international, we've got 4 topics. Pro-Palestinian activists being tracked, Bill Gates prophesizing a pandemic, peace activists at the Korean border, and Osama Bin Laden supposedly a conspiracy theorist. So another packed show to get through today, guys. But before we get started, we like to have a brief chat. And Lindsay, I know you've had a very productive week. How have you been, my good man?
Yeah, no, I've been good, thanks. Everything's pretty positive. Just looking ahead, see where we go next week.
Okay, short and sweet. And Ethan, you didn't manage to make it up to the studio today, but I'm sure things are lovely down there, halfway towards the Gold Coast. How have you been?
Yeah, thanks, Johnno. Not too bad. I had another productive week as usual. It seems like the weeks are getting shorter and shorter, and we've been doing the podcast was just yesterday, last week's episode. So it's a lot of things to fit in such short time, but we get there, and looking forward to a good show.
Well, we can probably talk about this in the Q&A after the show. There is a conspiracy theory meme that's starting to take foot. Don't let me forget in the Q&A after the show, we'll talk about that. But for now, we have to get straight into the news. And Lindsay, I know you've got something for us about poo raining on a birthday parade.
Yeah, thanks. This is a bit cheeky of me to put this here, but in the Sunday Mail on the 24th of May, that was the headline: "Poo rains on birthday party." And I'll quote: New York, a Pennsylvania girl's sweet 16th birthday was ruined when a torrent of human feces dumped by a passing aeroplane splattered all over the tables, chairs, decorations, got into the pool where everybody was swimming, and sent family members running for cover. Something fell from the sky. It was brown. It was everywhere. It got on everything, a guest at the party said. And then they end by saying aviation authorities are investigating. What can one add to that? Just get used to it. We can anticipate a lot more shit being dumped on us before this is all over. Well, let's hope it's not too long before it's all over. Okay, I'll throw it back to Ethan and see what he's got to say about that.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. That's my thoughts exactly. It's a good representation of what's happening in the world today. But on a serious note, I really can't take any of the mainstream media, specifically since I started doing this show with yourself and Johnno, has really started to, get on my nerves a lot. On one hand, they just push out nonsense propaganda, and on the other hand, they just report on pure nonsense that it should have no airtime on valuable print and radio and media resources. It's just the mainstream media is just there sometimes, I believe, just as a catalyst to see if our mental stability will make it through. What do you reckon, Johnno?
Yeah, well, I'd like to start the show off with something a little comical. You guys know that I find most of these news articles to be probably fake. So for me, what was funny about this was Lindsay's take on it. That he says that we've got more shit coming to rain in our parade, which is obviously true. But obviously, at the same time, like these articles, I wonder how many of the articles that we see in the newspapers are legitimate. And then some people will say, well, how could you get away with faking this kind of story? It'd be very easy. Just publish it. Who's going to challenge it? Who's going to question it? Who's going to go and call up around that town to find that family and ask them if this is all true? So I don't know if the story is legitimate, but I like Lindsay's take on it. We do have to get straight into the domestic segment, though, and the first topic is to do with more medical breakthroughs. Lindsay, take it away.
Okay, I will. Thank you for that. Look, there are so many. I'll just read the headlines. I won't go in and do too much with them. In the Courier Mail on page 24, on the 24th of May, the headline said, baby vaccine may protect, and I like the word may protect against cancer. And it had to do with a bacterial meningitis. I won't go on about it. On the Courier Mail again, on the 25th of May, on page 12, vaccine uses tumour to fight cancer. And the same thing about a patient's own tumour will be created, etc. The Courier Mail on page 24 on the 24th of May, Aussies get chance to trial drug. And it's a breakthrough. You know, it's always a breakthrough. And it could extend lives, hundreds of lives. And yeah, cancer patients denied access to new drugs will take part in a clinical trial. On and on it goes. Okay, the Courier Mail again on page 19 on the 29th of May, jellyfish sting offers hope in cancer battle. And I didn't even bother to do any quotes there. I thought, yeah, that says it all. Okay, on the Courier Mail on page 20 on the 29th of May again, the headline reads, genetic breakthrough could stop cancer spread. So it's not just stopping the cancer, it's stopping it spreading. I've no wish to bore you with all this, but I just want to drive home that every week there are at least 2 mays or could or perhaps in 5 or 10 years, and every week at home I receive a telephone call asking for money for medical research of one sort or another. Now, the way I look at this, it's a big business, and I suspect that it's a big con as well.
Yeah, it's you know, we've spoken about this off air, and I've spoken to Johnno personally about this, but you know, I was always someone who knew that they were pushing this propaganda, but it wasn't until we started actually looking at it that it became completely obvious when you see it in the mainstream publications. I mean, I'm just so happy that we've got such a vibrant and healthy world to look at in the future, Lindsay. I love how everything's getting better, and it's only a matter of time before all of these cures will start rolling out on the shelves. It's what you hear every second week in these publications. But it's not until you actually look at it and see that there is this nonsense. And you brought up that, again, the key words, the way they construct the articles, may, could, you know, all of these words that normalize it while still pushing their agenda that there's a better future. And we say it every week, but we have to keep saying this every week to drill home, especially to our international listeners, that this is a bombardment here. We don't have that many newspapers. We only have one major newspaper, the Murdoch-owned Courier Mail, in this city of Brisbane, and there's only, you know, Murdoch and Fairfax publications around the country. We don't have a variety of news, and we just get bombarded with this every day, and the people will just continue to eat that up, Lindsay.
Yeah. And one thing I found that did rain on their parade today, and that was that there was a woman during the week on television saying that she was completely paralysed after her flu shot. And I thought, I don't know how that got through. I mean, with all the good news here, how do they possibly let a disaster story like that get through? Anyway, I'll see what you've got to say on that as well.
Yeah, it's tough, and we're the only alternative perspective that is actually breaking these articles down and trying to see their agenda behind it. You know, we mentioned last week on the show propaganda about an upcoming pandemic, whilst it is in, you know, cohesion with the biosecurity bill that's coming out, trying to put the pieces together, trying to put what they're normalizing, what's creeping up on us. So it's definitely interesting stuff. But I think I'll throw it over to you there, John, and see what you've got to say about more medical breakthroughs in the Courier Mail.
Yeah, sorry about that, boys. Just seem to have lost connection. But yeah, I noticed on your agenda, Lindsay, when you sent that through, that you had another 5 of these articles from the one newspaper here in Brisbane in 1 week. And we've been talking about this for the last few weeks now, how they constantly put this nonsense in the media. And we've said to people, hey, look for it, see if you can notice it yourself. And since we started talking about it, I've been looking for it, and I have noticed it. It's almost every day in the newspaper or on the TV, there's a story about a medical breakthrough. And I'm certain now, it used to be a theory of mine, but now I'm certain of it. This is just a matter of, it's a plan to get into people's subconscious, to make them think that things are getting better, that science is helping them, that medicine's helping them, that everything's going to be okay if they just shut up and go along with the system. And, I'm glad that Lindsay's put the time in to put those articles together for us, and I hope he keeps on doing that. Let's see how many of these articles we can find next week and the week after, and I encourage our listeners to do the same thing. See how many you can find. It's not just 1 or 2. It is every day they're doing this, and you have to realize there's an agenda behind it. We do want to move on to the second topic for today, and Lindsay, this is another one of yours. It has to do with school kids trained to spot the jihadi.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, this one hit me right between the eyes when I read it. I couldn't believe it. It's the same thing, Courier Mail, page 1. So it was on the front page on the 24th of May, and that's the headline said, "Spot the Jihadi." And I'll quote, "Teachers and children would be taught how to spot potential terrorists in the classroom under plans before the federal government." That's the end of the quote. There was a big story about it as well, but I just put that was a relevant part. Okay, to me, this smacks of the old Soviet and Stasi tactics of training children while they are young to report on their family, and parents in particular. Now, if they felt the parents were thinking was not up to the state standards, they can dob them in. And if you think about it, it's only a small shift from dobbing in jihadis to dobbing in parents and neighbours and anybody else for that matter. So I'll throw that to Johnno and just see what you've got to say about that.
Well, I was actually going back over the film 1984, the British film that was made back in 1984, recently for a video that I was doing to do with the chocolate rations being reduced for my channel, John LeBon. So I actually happened to watch 1984 just over the last couple of days, and sure enough, there is a couple of scenes in the film, and of course I've read the book as well, and the film is actually pretty true to the book. There's a couple of scenes where the kids do exactly that, where they're informing on their own parents. In fact, Parsons, the tragic character of Parsons, who trusts the state, trusts Big Brother, trusts the government, right through up until his death, he's actually informed upon by his own son. And like you said, Lindsay, it's not so silly to think that if you've got a whole bunch of kids who are growing up to truly believe in the state, to truly believe in statism, and let's not beat around the bush here, that's exactly what the global warming agenda is all about, giving more and more power to a centralized authority to fix everything else for you. If you've got a whole bunch of kids growing up in state care, believing in statism, this is where we're headed, where those kids start informing on their own parents to the state, just like George Orwell's 1984. Ethan, what say you?
Yeah, I completely agree, Jono. It's straight out of the dystopian future that George Orwell wrote about, and I've spoke about this before. I've been in the education system, only left the education system a lot sooner than some of the other guests and whatnot that we've had on the show, possibly some of our audience. But even when I was there, they were teaching 9/11 and the war on terror. They were teaching that terrorists are bad. There's a big bad boogeyman, Osama Bin Laden, living in a cave, and he can do all of these things. We're learning about the Arab-Israeli conflict, how poor Israelis, because of the Palestinians being terrorists and whatnot. So it's already being taught in the schools to morph them into a perceived way of thinking, of statism. And now the next phase of this with the education system, and as we said, if you get them young, it's just like Animal Farm as well, George Orwell wrote about. If you get them young and you train them that they're the next generation of people to look out for it, then it's not too far off from 1984, and it's scary that it's just being rolled out within the education system so easy, and we can't do anything, essentially to stop it. And there's not the teachers underneath are brainwashed as well, and they don't know what to do about it. So it's a concerning thing, but you can see that they are slipping, in my estimation. The positive out of it is they're slipping with our generations, and they're resorting to going to the younger generations. But I think the younger generations are still there to to be saved. You know what I mean? There's a lot of propaganda being drilled into their heads, but you can use that in a positive way as well and use their tactics against them to teach your children, teach your friends and family, their children about what's really going on and try to, stop this brainwashing, Jono.
Yeah, well, it is brainwashing. It's indoctrination. And in the live chat, justiceforgermans.com, one of our loyal listeners says that he hasn't seen the film. I'm inferring from his comments that he hasn't read the book either. I do highly recommend that people who haven't done so, go and get your hands on the book, because it is, look, a lot of people know that the book people think that it foretells the future. I think if you sit down and really read the book, you realize it didn't foretell the future. It was written back in the late 1940s. It didn't foretell the future. It was talking about the present at the time that Orwell wrote it and the present today. The way that society is structured in the post-industrial revolution society. And we all know about how Orwell predicts that things will, there'll be cameras everywhere watching us, and that, we'll be lied to about war and all the rest of it. Yeah, he did say that in his book, but he says so many other things, and you will be, if you haven't read the book before, you'll be shocked at just how accurate the depiction is. And I only read the book myself for the first time last year, so I read the book, then I watched the film, then the play was on at QPAC here in Brisbane, so I got to go and see the play, all in the space of a couple of months, and I was lucky because I'd already started the deprogramming process before I found the book. What concerns me is how many school children are reading that book, and it's being taught to them completely wrong. And I've mentioned this on the air before, but I'll mention it again. When I went and saw the play at QPAC, and it was probably, a 200-person theatre. It wasn't a large production, but it was large enough. It was good for the most part, as good as a play can be in the 90 minutes that it has to try and do a book that's 600 pages long, whatever. And I thought, oh, what a terrific play. And I was so happy to see all of these school kids there. They would have been about 15 or 16, maybe year 9 or 10, I figured. So I said to one of them before the show, while we were waiting up to go in, I said, oh, what school are you guys from? What are you doing here? Oh, yeah, we're all here on excursion for the book. And I thought, this is wonderful. I had to wait till I was in my 20s to go and borrow the book to read it. I never thought to read it as a kid. These kids are getting asked to read it as part of their curriculum. Isn't this wonderful? So I thought, this is great. So after the play, I thought I'd listen into some of their conversations afterwards as we were walking out. And here's what I heard one of the pairs of kids talking about. As I was walking, one of the kids says, oh, that's exactly how things are today. And I thought, isn't this terrific? These kids are working it out. And then the other kid says, what do you mean? And then the first kid said to him, yeah, in Russia that Putin has banned televisions. dead set that is how the conversation went down, and my heart sank. And I've been meaning since then to see if I can go to a school, find out how that book is being taught, because if kids are getting asked to read the book but not being shown how it relates to them today in this country, then in a way they're being inoculated against it. In a way, I was lucky that I got to see just how things are today before I read a book which was talking about it. Whereas if I had read the book 1984 back when I was a kid, I would have thought, oh yeah, I get Orwell, I get it, but I wouldn't have gotten it. You don't get it until you understand that it relates to today. Lindsay, what say you?
Yeah, I agree with you entirely, and you got no idea how it gladdens my heart when I came across young fellas like you, and now all these people in the audience. A lot of them are only just in school or just leaving school or whatever, to be awake to this. Whereas I was getting to the point, I was becoming a bit downcast and thinking, am I the only person left in Australia who thinks along these lines? But no. Suddenly I'm surrounded by all these young people, and it's very, what's the word? It makes me feel very positive for the future. So it's been that's why I love coming on this. It's been really, really uplifting for me. So that'll do me. I won't get too carried away. But yes, no, it is good, and I'm sure that you'll find that some of the people in your audience who are my age or similar age will also be uplifted that this hasn't been lost on the current generation. And when I hear you talking about the school kids coming along, you give me great hope that you'll be able to influence them just as much as you've been influenced, because they're not silly. They're not silly. When they come to work and they've got to pay all that tax and all the things that happen to you, they'll pick up on it as well. So I think we're actually winning the battle. So it's quite heartening to me. I'll leave it.
That's a nice point to finish on for the topic. I see that in the live chat we've got over 30 people watching live. In the live chat they're talking about 1984 and other films that they've seen that have influenced them. They're talking about Wag the Dog. It's funny that you guys should be mentioning that, because if you go to my channel, John Le Bon on YouTube, I've been using both Wag the Dog and 1984 to make the point that what's happening today is just like what they talk about in those two films. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you go and check out John the Bond. There's a shameless plug for me in the first 30 minutes of the show. I usually wait much longer than that to start doing the shameless plugs. Time to move on to the third topic of today, and it ties straight in to the second topic. This one is Abbott's war on radicalisation. Ethan, take it away.
Thanks, Jono. Now, this is a new development on the ongoing saga against, an attack on so-called preachers of hate, so-called domestic extremists, and other nonsense terms that ever since we started this show from episode 1 have been spewed out and have been regurgitated into society at the moment. And this whole war started from, of course, the Newman Hayter incident and ASIO raising the terrorism level here at home. For those international viewers who haven't been familiarized with that, go check out our first couple of episodes where we talk in depth about what was happening at the time. But David Cameron was coming out at the time and saying that we're going to declare a war on non-violent extremists, people that think differently to the state. You were going to be the target now, etc., etc. And this is just another ongoing saga of this. And this week, Abbott has announced that the government will cancel dual citizenships for Australians who support ISIS, both domestically and internationally. It's an attack on so-called Muslim radicalisation here in Australia, where they'll cancel dual passports, which we all know is it's a bunch of rubbish, and it's just another way to have the framework in place to criticise anyone that thinks against the system as a so-called extremist in the future, and that's what's coming. I firmly believe that. But I just wanted to read out and take a little positive spin on it. There was an article this week by Jason Wilson of The Guardian, and he brought up the point that not too many people in the mainstream, on the media, on the papers, their discussion points, and what actually is radicalisation. Now, I'll read out from the article, quote, "The Australian government is currently proffering a range of solutions for radicalisation, but no one seems to be too concerned about explaining exactly what radicalisation is, how it proceeds, and what its connection to terrorism might be. At this point, you might begin to suspect that the fuzziness with which the concept is being deployed is deliberate, or that they themselves don't know what they mean by it, or both. On the evidence of recent days, it takes in everything from toting a gun in Syria to moody behaviour at school. The only common thread is that for now, radicalisation is something that happens exclusively to Australian Muslims, which it will eventually expand beyond that. On one hand, we have heard a lot from the government over a long time about the phenomenon of Australian citizens going to fight overseas and joining ISIS. Estimates of how many people are actually doing this fluctuate over time, and with the teller of the tale. In April, it was reported that there were around 100 people there and 30 have died doing it. This, we are told, is the fruit of radicalisation, strapping on the AK for this so-called death cult. This behaviour has already been criminalised, and what's more, anyone who is found to have engaged in it risks having their passport revoked. And now the article goes on and gives you a background about George Brandis and whatnot, and how they're really pushing to get this new legislation through to try and combat so-called non-violent extremism. But he does bring up a good point, is that that it's a broad terminology that hasn't been, the government don't have to justify what it means, and this is a continuously concerning thing, how they're incrementally pushing the steps towards having anyone that demonizes the system as an enemy, and it relates directly into what we were just talking about before, and it training the new generations to spot maybe family members and whatnot that don't believe what the government tells them. All of these things I see are a framework to come in, and I've been scripting a documentary for tottnews.com, which it'll go through and explain some of these things in a historical context of how this has been done in the past. But I wanted to take a positive spin on it and open it up for discussion this week, gentlemen. They'd like to tell us about radicalisation, non-violent extremism, ISIS death cults, but when you actually look at the language itself, it doesn't really have any basis behind it, and they're just getting away with not being able to justify what these terms mean. Lindsay, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, when you were talking about that, struck a chord with me in that I've had a run-in with the ATO a long time ago about income, the definition of income, and they couldn't give me one. And I said, I can't find this in the legislation. And then they said, no, the High Court has decided that income is income according to ordinary definitions. And that could mean any damn thing. And it's like you. What's a terrorist? Oh, a terrorist is a terrorist according to ordinary definitions. Well, who's an ordinary definition? This language thing is very important, and that's what they play with because they know they can get away with hinting at things. This is people assume something because they're never given an actual definition of it. So I agree with you entirely, and I think it needs to be tightened up because it allows these blokes to get away sort of under the wire, if that makes sense. And then they can do all manner of things to all manner of people. It's almost like the bikie laws up here, the Vlad laws. It wasn't about bikies at all. When you actually read it, it was about anyone that they decided they wanted to nominate. So you and I, three of us sitting here doing this broadcast, we could have come under the Vlad laws if they'd have decided they were going to name us. So yeah, I agree with you. We've got to be a bit more precise, and we've got to keep them on point. So I'll throw it back to you and see what you've got to say about that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Lindsay, and that's why I try to bring these articles up, because it is an incremental stage, and if you don't look at it while it's happening, it's going to just spring out of nowhere. And what they have been doing since all of and even if you believe the official stories, even if you believe that there are these evil people across the world fighting, even if you believe that there's evil people domestically at home that are supporting, that are planning out attacks, you still need to be shocked at the way that they are handling these things. And it's the same with the Vlad laws, no specific definition. There's a book that says that there are over 90 definitions of what terrorism is. There's no actual international definition of terrorism to use in an international court. So say, for example, if Osama Bin Laden was a real terrorist and he got caught, he would have to go to an international court, which you bring up with people and they straight out deny that he should not have his fundamental human rights. But even if you believe all of this, you need to look at this broad basis because it's going to be flipped on us. Non-violent extremism, people who think that 9/11 was an inside job, 7/7 bombings were a plot. They're putting the steps in motion to set up a grid. So when they want to flick the switch, the war is declared against us. The war is declared against people that have a morphed view from the system, no matter what the cause is, whether it's made up ISIS boogeyman or people like us talking about this. So I just want to bring it up, but it's good to see that there are journalists here still in this country that are saying, hang on a minute, let's go to the fundamentals and let's look at what you actually want to defy under this legislation and see that it's complete rubbish. Johnno, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything that you and Lindsay have said, and that's one of the reasons why I encourage people, if you can see that the system's nonsense, speak out against it. Whether it's in the live chat of a show like this, we've got more than 50 people watching live right now, whether it's making your own videos like so many people are starting to do, writing your own articles, whatever. The more people who are speaking out against the system, then the harder it's going to be for anybody should they ever decide to flick the switch, as you put it, and put us all away, because there's just not enough prisons. And if you go out there and speak to people, yes, there are lots of morons out there, and I talk about what I call the polarization. It seems to me like we're becoming more polarized. The dumb people are becoming dumber. They're becoming more indoctrinated by school. They're becoming more entranced by their televisions. They get more sucked into the groupthink, and they're possibly as dumb as humans have ever been, sure. But at the same time, there's another group of people who are pulling completely away from that, but some of them aren't as vocal as us. So if you take the time to go out there and talk to people and you know how to start a conversation, don't come up to someone straight away say, oh, what do you think of RFID chips or something like that. Just start a conversation with someone, start talking with them, find a way to put out a simple question about government power or about civil liberties or something, know how to frame it, and you'll find that a lot of people do have issues with what's going on right now, as any sensible person should. So the more of us who are speaking out against it, the more of us who are doing shows like this, the harder it's going to be if and when they decide to, as you put it, Ethan, flick the switch.
That's the main thing to bring up, bring up these articles on the show and encourage people to discuss it. Just say, hang on a minute, do you think that someone that has an opposing view to what the government wants should be defined as a terrorist, and explain these things to you? I think that you'd find that most people would say, of course not, everyone's entitled to freedom of speech, and it's not that they don't believe otherwise, it's just they haven't been exposed to an alternative, and that's what we try to present here. That's why I try to bring up these articles, and that's why I'm trying to get the documentary done as fast as I can, so that by the time I do release it, I'm not labeled a terrorist just yet. But it seems like we're going towards that, but there is hope, because we've got people that are aware of this, that are identifying this. Even in the mainstream media, it's catching on as well, that you can't just get away with this anymore. And if we keep bringing it up incrementally amongst our friends, families, our neighbourhoods, I think it'll have a positive effect on it.
Yeah, and in the live chat, Knowledge Driven says that speaking out, there's a near infinite ways to creatively achieve this on individual and group levels, to creatively achieve it. And yeah, I agree. Like I said, you can do it any way you like, whether it's making videos, doing hangouts like this online, or making podcasts, or writing articles, or like I said, just speaking to those around you. Don't let the morons put you off. Yes, we are surrounded by morons in every direction, but don't let that put you off. There are plenty of other people out there who are scratching their heads and wondering how all of this is happening so suddenly. We will come back to all of that again in a moment, but just quickly, let's segue to topic 4 here. Queensland police officers dropping like flies, Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, once again, the Courier Mail, but this time I got it from their website. Normally I can't get through to their website very much, but this time I did. And this was on the 22nd of May, and the headline said, 7 Queensland police officers stood down in May. And I'll quote, 7 Queensland police officers have been suspended in May, an average of almost 1 every 3 days. The latest involves a detective stood down over allegations he inappropriately released confidential information. The 45-year-old detective, senior sergeant from the Central Region, is subject to a disciplinary investigation into allegations he also permitted the inappropriate use of Queensland Police Service resources and inappropriately received gifts and benefits. So I don't know exactly what that means. Anyway, earlier this week, 2 officers were stood down, including one acquitted for a high-profile death in custody. The 2 are under investigation for engaging in an unauthorised pursuit and inappropriate use of force. So far in 2015, 16 officers have been suspended. Well, we're not even 6 months through the year yet. That's a lot. According to the official police blog, which issues alerts whenever an officer is stood down, 8 of those suspended are from the Southeast Policing District. 4 officers have been suspended from the Central Region, while there has been 1 suspension in each of the Northern and Far Northern districts, Road Policing Command and Operations Support Command. So when I was putting that together, it didn't dawn on me. That's quite a lot for only halfway through 2015. So anyway, I'll throw that back to you, Ethan, and see what you've got to say about that.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. It is. That's actually surprising. I haven't heard of that so far. Obviously, I can't speak specifically on the individual cases and what the motives and whatnot have been, but the thing that I did get from all that information was the broader perspective that I have, and that is that it's the police system in general, the way that they're educated, the way they train, the way that they're recruited and brought into this. And we've spoke about it through numerous topics, whether it be terrorism raids or whatever the case may be, militarization of police. I think you'll find there was Queensland police down here at the Gold Coast that were caught being in drug smuggling syndicates and all this sort of thing. I think that you will find and you've gone through this period of transition, Lindsay, but we went from a time where the police were, looking after the people. The police were the respected, upholding citizens to protect the community, protect the people. And now it's incrementally gotten worse with the IQ standards, with all of these things, the way that most police don't know what the laws are, how they do all of these things, and it seems to be getting it in a steady decline every time. So I think, even though I can't speak on the individual cases, which is it's a lot of wrongdoing within the police force, I think that the wrongdoing is the source of the police force in general, and the environment that these people are exposed to, whatever that environment may be. We can speak about it another time, but that's what I got from the article, and I'll throw it over to John to see if he's got anything to add to that.
Well, the reason why I like this one on Lindsay's agenda, I thought it'd be good just to bring up for a brief chat, just to remind the people that, hey, the ones who are being paid tax money ostensibly to protect you, well, you know what? 7 of them in Queensland, our third largest state here in Australia, 7 of them in the space of a month have had to be reprimanded or stood down or whatever the case may be for alleged misconduct. And sure, in any institution, you're going to have some bad apples, what have you. I suppose anybody who's spent much time dealing with the police, particularly on the other side, either as an officer or as a criminal, an alleged criminal, as the case may be, knows that these people aren't what they make them out to be on television. We have so many television programs that make the police out to be these professional, upstanding citizens who there's just a couple of bad guys who are soon weeded out. That's not the case at all. And if people had a better understanding of that, I think they wouldn't be so quick to attack the alleged criminals, and they'd realise that many of the worst criminals are the ones getting paid their tax money ostensibly to protect them. We do have to move on to the 5th topic. It ties into the 3rd, actually, and this is to do with the corporate media promoting RFID chips. Ethan, take it away.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jono. And again, this ties right into just mainstream propaganda we bring up every time. Now, before I do start, I do want to say I do think that this is completely fabricated. I didn't, in terms of the survey results and the way that it was constructed to normalise in the eyes of the people. But I wrote an article at tottnews.com about this just to show you what the mainstream media is pushing and what they are trying to put into the subconscious of people as the normalization. And whether you believe it's an accurate article or not, I think that the point is that the mainstream media are continuously pushing this world. And at tottnews.com on May 26, I published an article, Mark of the Beast, Australian Implants to Aid Payments with the Wave of a Hand. Quote, it is a future, many concerned citizens have warned for decades about, a world where digital research would evolve to include fundamentals of human biology, a world creeping towards a cyborg-like age with microchips and implants at the forefront, just as George Orwell conjured in his dystopic visions for humanity. And we've seen previous examples of this. We've seen it be normalized over years, and we've said this before. 10 years ago, you said that microchips were going to become normalized. You were painted a conspiracy theorist. You were being painted as a loony because you were trying to promote that this is on the way. And now today we've seen, since the development of the VeriChip device, RFID implants for iPhones, houses, and much more. But this week, in an article posted by The Australian, and as always, I'll link at AusRoundtable.com to all this information, it has been revealed that Visa and the University of Technology in Sydney have announced a partnership to explore the future of wearable technology, including the development of a new implanted device to make everyday transactions easier for the public. Quote, is it retail therapy gone mad, or the dawn of a new cyborg age, or a new meaning to going down under? Whatever the case, a fair proportion of Australians are receptive to technology mixing with their precious human organic flesh if it means making payments at retail stores is easier. 32% would be interested in paying with a smartwatch, 29% with a smart ring, and 26% with smart glasses. It is little wonder that Visa regards Australians as adventurous, blah, 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 blah. The article reveals that a concerning number of Australians, including 25% of those surveyed, are slightly interested in the notion of having a chip implanted in their skin as an effective way to make payments over the counter, as a chip would allow consumers to pay without a wallet, a credit card, etc., etc. The new approach would allow consumers to wave their hand just across an outlet, similar to, you have your phones and your chip responsive technology at retail stores and at train stations these days. And I did a bit of research, and this supposed survey was conducted by a global payments firm, by UMR, who the CEO of UMR, Campbell White, has a PhD in social and media psychology. So he's a doctor in social and media psychology, so he understands propaganda. He understands how to get this out to the masses. And John Udding, the company director rather, has served as a pollster for 2 Australian Prime Ministers, 3 New Zealand Prime Ministers, and numerous Australian state premiers. So right there, that's why I believe that the stats of 25% normalizing this isn't a legitimate statistic that they have because of the people behind it. But even then, it's still what they're pushing. Now, my article goes on for a bit to give a background on what the Verichip human implant was and the path leading to it. I call it the path to dystopia. And, Reuters articles reporting on office workers implanting chips in their hands, Forbes documenting the process of implanting the Grafster RFID chip in patients back in 2012. And the one that I've brought up on the show before was human microchipping. I've got you under my skin, which was normalizing using iPhones and whatnot with a chip that people have already done. So this was a very concerning article, but I think I wanted to open this up for discussion, but in my estimation, I'll throw it to you first, Lindsay. In my estimation, this is a fabricated thing. We know that the polls are normally fabricated, and when you look at the people that polled this, and you look at they've been pollsters for Australian prime ministers and whatnot, which we know how that connects. I think it's completely fabricated. But even if it's not, the Australian, one of our largest mainstream media publications here in this country, is normalising Australian implants being put into the AIDS, into the skin of people here in Australia, and that's a very concerning thing, Lindsay.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I'm in two minds about whether those statistics are correct or not. Insofar as that, I go into a supermarket or wherever, and I see people, almost everybody now pays with a card, and I've like we're talking about, you try and engender a discussion about these things, and I sort of say to them, well, aren't you worried that one day they might just turn it off and you'll be caught out with nothing? We were talking about this 20 years ago, and we could see this coming, but these people today, I would say probably 90% of people are using this card for everything they do. They don't go with a card to the bank or somewhere and get some cash and use cash, for 4 or 5 days or whatever. Every transaction is with a card. So it doesn't surprise me that, having become used to doing that, and it does take time by the time you put your card in and put a PIN number or whatever, they may well be looking for something much simpler and think, oh well, it's only a small sacrifice, it's not going to worry. But the other point I'd like to make is I know a lady who's had chips in her dogs, and both the dogs had died of cancer very early, soon after the chips. So I'm not at all convinced that the chips are safe. That's the first thing. So there are a few different things here that I'm concerned about, but that'll do me. I'll throw it back to Johnno and see what he's got to say now.
Well, let me read out an article that I prepared. This is from The Independent. Denmark moves closer to cashless society, 7 May 2015. Quote, Denmark has moved one step closer to becoming the world's first cashless society as the government proposes scrapping the obligation for retailers to accept cash as payment. The Danish government has said that as of next year, business such as clothing retailers, restaurants, and petrol stations should no longer be legally bound to accept cash payments. The proposal is part of economic growth measures which are being released ahead of this year's Danish election. It aims to reduce costs and increase productivity for Danish businesses. The change would need to be approved in a vote at the Folketing, the Danish parliament, but the timing of the vote has not yet been set. However, in a country where cashless payments are so common, it looks unlikely that the proposal will face much opposition. 5 of Sweden's 6 big banks now operate cashless branches where possible, and some predict the country could become entirely cashless by 2030, end quote. So that seems to be the direction we're heading in. And if you look around, you notice that a lot of these things, they're kind of beta tested in different countries before they started. In fact, I think EFTPOS was actually first begun in New Zealand. I could be wrong there, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was started in New Zealand almost as a test to see how will it be adopted by the masses, what are the best ways to promote its use through media and other means. And then once you've got sort of your test case out of the way, then you start rolling it out. And it looks as though the Scandinavian countries, that's exactly what they're doing with the cashless money. And I guess my question to you, Ethan, would be, do you use EFTPOS? And if you do you think that you're part of the problem?
Yeah, it's a good question, Johnno. I'm a cash person myself. I've hardly ever used my bank cards or my EFTPOS to pay for anything unless I've really needed to. I'm completely a cash person, and I can see that sort of thing there. But again, as Lindsay said, we've all been dragged into this. You know, that society has been constructed where most people have to pay with a credit card now. Most people have to pay with a debit card and an FPOS machine. You know, everything. There used to be times when, and I'm sure Lindsay remembers, where you would get your cash in hand at the end of the week after you had your job in a yellow envelope or whatever, and you could go away. But now everything has to go through the centralized systems and through the banking system and onto your cards, so everything's tracked. And I think you brought up a good point there, Johnno. It does. I think that entirely relates, and I was going to bring up this point, was that I see a future where they want to have, you know, a one world digital currency, but also to have implants in the people to benefit that. And we've spoken about this on the show before, but you know, implants so that you have all of your information and your data on there, and you can pay because everything's digital now. There's no need for money and all of this sort of nonsense that they push today. And eventually, you know, that chip could be developed as a device to, you know, just switch off people or whatever, you know, it causes cancer and all these sort of things. And that's just my observation. But I wanted to bring up this article just because it's that they always go somewhere with it. If you're reading something that they put in the mainstream media, you have to think 5 steps ahead. You have to think of where they are at in terms of their thinking and what they're revealing to the public now. So if the Australian and all of these mainstream media presses, such as, you know, 9news.com.au, are trying to push whether it's legitimate statistics or not, they're still pushing the normalization of implants in the skin, and that's an extremely concerning thing, because this consumeristic society, if you brainwash them appropriately through the media, would accept it, and after that, you know, that poses a real big thing just for convenience in a materialistic society. So I thought I'd bring this up, just as I do with most of the articles, to just see where we're going and open a discussion point. And you can head to tottnews.com to check out the articles there with all the links, Johnno.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, in the live chat, we've got a few comments. Lord Rollo says, I've seen when EFTPOS goes down in stores in Europe, it's bedlam in Belgium or in Denmark. And Greenpill says, lucky they will never fully eliminate cash, otherwise the CIA, etc., won't be able to keep their black op drug industry thriving. And it's interesting how few people who watch the news all the time and think they're informed have any idea of the fact that it's on public record that organizations like the CIA make untold amounts of money, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars a year through the black market, through the drug trade, and that's all done in cash. So for that reason, you wouldn't think that cash would be entirely removed, but at the same time, we can see that we're creeping closer towards a cashless society. Maybe for us peasants, there'll be no cash, but for the CIA, there'll be cash because they need it, you know, for national security. Lindsay, what say you?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I suspect that they've got the ability to. They've probably got certain bankers in their pockets who are also crook, and they can get around it if they really want to. When we're talking about cash, I think they'll find a way around it. You know. Anyway, I don't put anything past them. But yes, they certainly will try and bust you and I into not having any cash because they want to control us. But I think the moment they do that, I think they're going to pull the whole system down around their ears. I don't think we're going to put up with that. And somebody on the one of the comments said that that sorry, I'm amusing myself here. Yeah, no, some of the comments were suggesting that if they destroy cash completely, people just won't go along with it. Put it that way, and then the whole deck of cards will come down, and so we'll just see where it goes. I'm not quite sure. We talking before about 1984, and you start to wonder how far can they go, and how much will we put up with, or are we on the verge of revolting against this? We'll just see where it goes. I won't say any more about it because we've got another article coming up soon about cash as well. So I'll wait till I get to that.
Fair enough, mate. Well, I'll tell you what, Ethan, this was your segment, so I'll give you the final word and then we'll move on.
Yeah, thanks, Johnno. Again, at AusRoundtable.com, all the links will be provided to all of this information for you to check out for yourself. And if you aren't familiar with how microchips have been introduced as as a normal thing in society across the world, go check out some of the links on my article at the end there. For me, it's a big topic. We can talk about money in general. The perception of money. If everything goes digital, then the cash money won't. The perception of whether that's real or not, all of this sort of thing, because we all know it's just a game to those that have enough money to spend. It's just a way to control us. But I just see that they're normalizing, and then they're going to introduce ways to make it easier to pay for things, and then when that's in place, then they'll be able to put out a digital society, everything like that. So we just need to be aware of these things now. We need to spread this information with friends and family, because we've got an uphill battle, but information's on our side, and we can spread it with people. And if you talk to them correctly about it, you'll see that most people will be receptive to the notion that this is a bad thing, Jono. So just check those links out at AusRoundtable.com.
A couple more comments from the live chat. We've got over 50 people watching live, so thank you to all of you for coming out. Red Siren says that in Belgium they're being encouraged to pay through their mobile phones, and I've seen that here in Australia as well. So we can see this, whether it's through the mobile phones or your EFTPOS card or RFID chips. I think anybody who is thinking for themselves can see exactly where we're headed. So thanks, Red Siren, for the comment. And just going back a couple of segments, we were talking about Queensland Police having to ask 7 officers to stand aside for alleged misconduct. Silver Slave 333, a loyal listener, says that those 7 were probably the good ones, Lindsay. So take that. We better fast forward now to the 7th topic for today, and that's to do with the Reserve Bank of Australia warning borrowers about too much debt. So Lindsay, this is your segment.
Okay, thanks for that. This was the Courier Mail, page 6 on the 19th of May, and you virtually read the headline out. Reserve Bank warns borrowers about too much debt. And I'll quote, the Reserve Bank of Australia is warning borrowers against taking on excessive debt as concerns grow about a potential housing bubble in Sydney and Melbourne. This comes on top of all the signs coming out of the US suggesting a pullback in the stock market in the September-October period, and all the talk last week in the press and on television of Queensland sinking into a recession. Please keep in mind that the G20 resolved to protect the banks by a bail-in of your money held in the banks and your superannuation if necessary. So I'll just leave that there and see what I'll throw to Ethan first and see what he's got to say about that.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Again, it's trying to, in my estimation, it continues to normalise that these things are going to happen when, if you do the research, it's already happening and has been an ongoing process for years. It's a zombie economic system. It's designed to continue on like this, and they keep telling us, oh, we might go into a recession. We have to, raise the debt level, whatever the argument may be, interest rates, all of these things. People don't realise that we are already in that zombie system at the moment, and it's just their game to manipulate to either crush us more or make us invest and spend more before they drop it. To me, it's just the same old rhetoric, Lindsay. So I'll throw that over to Jono and see if he's got anything to add to it.
Well, the reason why I wanted Lindsay to give us his topic on his news on that topic was because it feeds in well to the 8th segment for today. So I might as well read this one out. This is to do with foreign investment, and the reason why the two-tone will become more clear as I read this out. So bear with me here. I've got a little bit of information to read out. This is from the ABC, and again, this is topic 8 and our final domestic topic today. It's from the ABC. It's entitled Chinese Invasion, Leaflet Campaign Targeting Foreign Investors Could Fuel Racism in Sydney, Politicians Fear. May 29, 2015. Let me read that headline out again. Chinese Invasion, in inverted commas, Leaflet Campaign Targeting Foreign Investors Could Fuel Racism in Sydney, Politicians Fear. Quote, the man behind a letterbox campaign warning Sydney's housing market is under threat from Chinese invasion is an idiot, New South Wales Multiculturalism Minister says. Nick Folkes said he had distributed thousands of the leaflets on Sydney's North Shore and in the Inner West, which blamed Chinese investment for the high cost of housing in Sydney. Aussie battlers are being pushed to the fringes of our cities while foreign intruders are reaping the benefits of our hard-working previous generations, the leaflet said. The new, dispossessed or forgotten people will one day be remembered as the stolen generation, priced out of their market by invading Chinese foreigners. The campaign campaign's new figures from property consultancy Knight Frank showed Chinese investment in the Sydney and Melbourne property markets doubled last year. They show Chinese investors spent more on Australian real estate than on properties in London and New York for the first time. Multiculturalism Minister John Ajaka said the leaflets were vile and disgraceful. New South Wales is one of the most multicultural societies in the world, and we are very proud of that, he said. These attacks by this idiot, and I can't think of any other word to call him, seek to destroy all of the work that so many people have done together for the benefit of the whole state. End quote. Now, I'll pause it there. I've got more to read out. Firstly, since when do we even have multiculturalism ministers? And doesn't the fact that we have multiculturalism ministers tell you all you need to know about the real controllers of this country and what they have planned for us? And secondly, notice that the epithets vile, disgraceful, and idiot are used by a so-called government minister, no less, to deride an Australian citizen for merely questioning the consequences of mass foreign investment into Australian real estate. A lot of people are sound asleep, but at the same time, more and more people are waking up to the severe negative consequences of foreign investment and mass immigration. And once somebody breaks through the indoctrinated mantra of multiculturalism is good for everybody, it is only a small step for them to realize that political correctness is all about trying to silence dissent. And this kind of bellicose rhetoric from a so-called minister will only hasten that waking up process. Lindsay, with all of that said, I've got more to read out from the article, but just based on the part that I've read out so far, what say you?
Yeah, no, I agree entirely with you. It's very presumptuous of him to be dumping on somebody who's having just exercising his political right to express himself. And I find that quite offensive, actually. And calling somebody an idiot or all those names you were using, who obviously has a better understanding of what's going on in this country than this clown, this minister has. So yeah, I agree with you there. I've spoken about this once before, just backing up what you're just saying. I was speaking to some people who were from Sydney, or maybe 12, 14 years ago, and they were talking about in some of the eastern suburbs of Sydney, they would have real estate agents would drive up with a prospective Chinese customer, and they drive up the street, and if there were a few Mercedes or whatever in the street, then they would just buy. They wouldn't even go into the buildings. They would just say that one, that one, that one, and they would buy whatever that was available. So this is not a new thing. This has been going on for nearly 2 decades. So it's just getting to the point now where it's starting to make a major impression, and it's starting to keep ordinary Australians out of the market. So that's about all I've got to say. I'll throw it to Ethan and see what he's got to say about it.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I saw this as well, this story, and I focused specifically on the demonization of this character for spreading this, and there was actually mainstream media articles, and all they were doing, they weren't looking at the statistics of Chinese investment. They weren't looking at how, there is a merit behind this argument, which is a fundamental freedom of expression. But all they would link this to was the similarities between this and Nazi propaganda. They relate it back to 70 years ago in a war, and to put these vocal points out there for people to immediately dismiss them. We talk David Cameron's speech against nonviolent extremism. He brought up the KKK. He brought up all of these key words that resonate in the minds of people to identify who they're criticizing with that. And we all know, we can discuss the Nazi Party and whatnot in different segments and whatnot. But the first thing that I found disgraceful and should be, pulled up immediately was just how they continuously put to any sort of posters or anything, they always relate it to Nazi propaganda, which automatically the masses that are conditioned to believe that's evil will identify that person as evil. And the second point is the freedom of expression part, and we've been seeing this normalization of the term beyond free speech. I've seen it with activists on Facebook and out in the community. I've seen it with government officials. They say, yeah, you're entitled to your free speech, but there's a level that goes beyond free speech. And I mentioned this last week, of course, what does the word free mean? It means, limitless, boundless, freedom. There's no barriers because you are free. So that's a oxymoron on itself, and they're trying to actually condition the people to believe that there is a limit to freedom of expression, and they've been doing this for years. But I'll throw it back over to Johnno so we can continue. But those were the two main points that I got out, was the reference to Nazi propaganda and the demonization of freedom of expression, whatever it may be, Johnno.
Yeah, and the reason why this ties into the seventh topic when Lindsay was talking about the RBA warning us of too much debt is that it is true that our government is in far too much debt, and it's also true that our public, that the citizens are in far too much debt. The median house price in Sydney, our largest city, is fast approaching $1 million. And the Australian dollar at the moment, what's it worth? I don't know, 80 or 90 US cents. It's not some peeling little currency. A dollar here is more or less about the same value as it is, say, in a place like the United States. Now, can you imagine that in your city that holds the biggest population of any city in your country, and in a 5 major city country, can you imagine that the median, the middle house price there in an urbanized country in that city is approaching $1 million? It's madness. And of course, most people who try and buy into the property market, they have to get mortgages. So of course they're mortgaged up to the eyeballs. Of course they're in too much debt. And why is that? Well, one obvious reason is because they're being priced out of the market by this massive foreign investment from places like China. And in the article, as I read out, the Chinese are now investing more into Australian real estate than they are into either New York or London. Get your head around that for a moment. So then this character, Mr. Folks, comes along and starts distributing flyers talking about this fact. Nothing racist whatsoever in the flyer. And what does a government minister say that he is? He says that he's an idiot. And what else? What other terms does he use to describe him? He calls him an idiot, and he says that he's vile and disgraceful. Now, if you can't see a problem with that, then you might as well switch off right now, because there's no hope for you. I want to read out some more of the article. Quote, Mr. Folks said his leaflets did not target Chinese Australians buying homes, but China-based investors. This is all about the economic genocide that is occurring right across Australia, where locals are being priced out of the market. He said, foreigners, whether they be Chinese or anybody, should not have the right to own residential property in Australia. Mr. Folks is trying to register a political party, Party for Freedom, end quote. Now, I can assure the listeners that I'll be paying close attention to Mr. Folks and his attempt at starting a political party. I haven't yet had time to determine if he is yet another Zionist stooge honeypot operation or if he's the real deal. But if he is legitimate, I will be promoting his efforts, and if he is a Zionist stooge honeypot, I'll be exposing him in coming weeks and months, so stay tuned. Let me read out another quote from the article. Quote, according to the Foreign Investment Review Board, China overtook the United States as the biggest source of proposed foreign investment in Australia in 2013-14. Proposed Chinese investment totaled $17.5 billion that financial year, which was mainly driven by a large increase in residential real estate approvals. The federal government is planning to change the rules for foreign buyers to force those buying residential property to pay fees of at least $5,000. The government will also set up a register to track foreign ownership of residential and agricultural property. In other words, they don't even have one yet. The reforms are due to take effect in December, end quote. So the government is planning to take their cut with $5,000 fees for foreign investors, but that is it. And of course this is the case because, as I've explained in great detail in a video about mass immigration on my channel, my YouTube channel, John the Bond, we are importing 250,000 people per year into a small, highly urbanized country. It's suicide, it's madness, and if the masses ever wake up to what is going on, they will be mad, and those who are responsible for this would be right to fear for their lives. Lindsay, what say you?
Yes, I agree entirely. But I'll try and be a bit optimistic in this. We had something very similar to this maybe 2 decades ago or a bit longer with the Japanese investing in Australia in huge amounts. And suddenly when the Japanese economy went belly up, they withdrew all their investment or a huge amount of their investment and took it back to consolidate their base in Japan. So I've been looking at this Chinese investment, but I have in the back of my mind, they have a one-child policy, and eventually, if you read some of the books on this, given that those children will in 25, 30 years' time be wanting to buy houses and various other things, and there will be nobody there to do it because they've only got one child for every two parents. Eventually, China is going to implode, to some degree anyway, implode on itself, and things will go bad, and then they may well have to pull all their investments out of Australia and go back to China to try and consolidate their base as individuals within their own country. Maybe I'm wishful thinking, but having seen the Japanese do it, I'm optimistic that this may well occur in the future. But in the meantime, I think we're going to have a major bubble burst in Australian real estate. We seem to have escaped when the American market fell, sometimes down to a third or even less of their values after the 2007-8 recession. We seem to escape it, but I don't think we're going to escape it the second time. Though it's just such a big bubble at the moment. I think it is going to burst, and we really are going to feel a lot of pain as a community.
There's going to be a lot of poo raining on our parade, Lindsay, and in the live chat. In the live chat, Knowledge Driven says that the only reason that the economy isn't on the death cart is residential and commercial real estate. That drives everything, and I completely agree with him. I've been meaning to spend more time talking about this. If you look into the leverage of our big four commercial banks, you'll learn two very important things. The first one is that 2/3 of their lending goes into real estate. The OECD average is 1/3. In Australia, it's 2/3. The second thing you'll realize is that they're mortgaged to the point where even a 3 to 4% drop across their asset base, i.e. the houses, the real estate that's backing the mortgages, just a 3 to 4% drop could send them bankrupt. So we can't afford to have a housing correction. If there's a housing correction, there's a complete and utter financial collapse. That's the way the system's been set up. And if you look into this for yourself, you'll see this. It isn't a conspiracy theory. It's the facts staring you right in the face. And you can find these facts from reputable sources. But what happens is they don't tie all the dots together. You can read about how close we came to collapse during the Lehman Brothers thing in 2008. You can read about that in mainstream sources, but that's all they'll say about that. You can read about the leverage of our banks in this article or that article, but that's all they'll say about that. And you can read about the fact that we lent 2/3, that our commercial banks lent 2/3 of their lending into real estate rather into commercial or other assets. You can read about that, but that's all the article will tell you. None of our mainstream media are painting all of these dots together for you. And if you paint them together for yourself, you'll realize we can't afford to have a housing dip. Otherwise, the whole thing goes bang. And that's one of the reasons I believe why they're going ahead with this mass immigration, why they're going ahead with this mass foreign investment, is because they know that if they don't, the whole thing's going to go kaputski. Ethan, what say you?
Yeah, it's certainly very concerning, Johnno, and I know that we've spoke about this off air. It's an issue that's you hold close to yourself as well. It's a focal point for you about this, and obviously the way there's two different aspects of it here. One is the subtle takeover of this country that's been happening for a number of years now and has intensified through investment and through some of our agriculture and all of this as well, our exports and whatnot. And that's a concerning thing, what we're speaking about now. And yes, I agree with Lindsay. There's a real estate bubble brewing, and it could very well. I've seen some people predict that a bubble will have to burst eventually if this continues. But the second point is I always bring it back to this country used to have a voice to speak out against these things, but we have been conditioned to accept this as a normal thing. We used to have an Australia where people would say we don't want this to happen to our country. We don't want this to happen to what they believe was a sovereign nation at the time. And what really gets me in all of this is that we cannot criticize this without being demonized these days. The country has been so brainwashed and manipulated through a society of multiculturalism, through a society of accepting these new viewpoints without questioning them, that they believe that this is also a normalized thing. And anyone that even wants to put up a flyer speaking of a Chinese takeover like this is demonized, is referred to being a Nazi and all of these things. So on one hand, there's the actual concerning process of it happening, Johnno, but then on the other hand, you see that the voice that we do have left in this country is continuously demonized if we try to address some of these concerning issues.
And that's exactly why I think it's so important that we have platforms like this to discuss these matters and to let the live chat discuss. So let me read out a few comments for you. Watcher1421 says that when the so-called terror from the east rolls in, it won't be to invade, it'll be to collect what's legally theirs. Press Reset Earth says that the mean is more important than the median, and that's referring to the fact that I said that the median house price in Sydney is fast approaching $1 million. Well, I respectfully disagree, because with real estate, what you'll find in Australia, particularly in places like Sydney, is the top end of the market is out of this planet. We're talking $1.5, $2 million just for the upper edge of the market, not even getting to the top where it gets to the $5, $6, $7 million. So actually, I'm pretty confident the mean price is higher than the median price. If you look at it from a mean perspective, it's even worse. So we just use the median price because that's orthodoxy, but the mean doesn't make it any better. Trevor Weir says that most people don't even know what a reserve bank is, or even that we have one. Well, I agree with him. Most people don't know what a reserve bank is or what it does. I think most of them know that we have the Reserve Bank of Australia. They just don't understand how it works. They don't understand how it relates to them, but it relates to everything you do, because, hey, why are you going to work? You're going to work for money. Who decides how much that money is worth? Well, what do you know? Monetary policy is controlled by the Reserve Bank of Australia. And most people seem to think, oh, well, the Reserve Bank of Australia is just doing the government's work for it. On the contrary, I would put to you that the government is doing the Reserve Bank's work for it. We can discuss that more in a future show. In the live chat, they're having a good discussion about that right now. And Greg Williams says, going back to the fact that this person, all he did was hand out a few thousand flyers talking about this massive Chinese investment. That's all he did. Greg Williams points out that it's only racism if you're white. And for me, that brings it back to the central issue here. There is a white genocide taking place in this country. Most people don't like the use of that terminology because it's too full on. It conjures up connotations or images that they don't want to have to deal with, or they think it's too excessive. All right then, well, you tell me what you call it when you have an influx of 250,000 people a year, the majority of them from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, and very few of them white people, coming into a formerly white country. And you tell me what you call it when many of those people are coming with money, a lot of them from the corrupt Communist Chinese Party, coming here with hot money, buying houses with suitcases full of cash, pricing the locals here out of the market. You tell me what you call that, because I call it a white genocide. That's what's taking place today, and it's taking place in all white countries and only white countries. Explain to me why this is going on. Now, some people will say, oh, you're confusing a few separate issues here. You're confusing mass immigration, you're confusing mass foreign investment, you're confusing, demographic issues, what have you. I'm not confusing them, you are, because these things are all related, and it's time that people woke up to this fact, and that's why I'm so glad to see that people are starting to realize that A, mass foreign investment is pricing young Australians out of the market, and B, for simply bringing that up, you're demonized as vile or disgraceful or what have you. All of the words that they normally reserve for the racist. Why are they doing that? Because it's now politically incorrect to question mass foreign investment. And why is that? Because it's tied in with all of the other things. And once people realize this, once they start to understand that you've been conditioned not to question mass foreign investment, you might start to realize that you've been conditioned not to question mass immigration. And once you do that, you might begin to understand that you've been conditioned not to question multiculturalism. And once you do that, you might begin to understand there's a reason why you've been trained not to question these things, because they do not help you. They make things much worse for you. And if and when people wake up to this, there's going to be hell to pay. Lindsay, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, there's not a lot I can add to that. I agree with everything you've said, and I'll come to the hell to pay business. I've discussed this before. There are certain people of certain tribes in this country who are already preparing. Even as they try to turn the screws down on us, they're ready to run, because it's happened to them so many times over the last couple of thousand years. They can't help themselves, they overreach, they get a reaction, and they've got to flee. And they're hoping they can keep the lid on this one, but at the same time they're preparing in case they've got to run. So they know what they're doing, and they're the ones. I mean, you had, I think you were mentioning it last week or the week before, about our glorious leader Abbott saying what a wonderful fellow Rupert Murdoch was. Well, Rupert Murdoch's the one leading this, and he is the mouthpiece of this tribe we're talking about. So yeah, I agree with it. That's enough. I start ranting, so I'll throw it back to Ethan and see if he's got something to finish off with.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. There's not too much I can add onto this discussion. I think we've covered it more, and I look forward to Johnno, speaking more on the specifics of the investment here in the future. And again, for me, it just comes back to the two variables of one, that this is a major thing that's happening. And regardless of whether you have an emotional attachment to multiculturalism and whatnot, you just have to look at it from a statistical level and put the dots together yourself, in my estimation, and come to your own conclusions that way. And the second one, obviously, freedom of expression, every day, incrementally telling us that we can't criticize anything that's happening because you have to accept it and normalize it in a society today. And I think that's extremely concerning. So it's an interesting topic, and I look forward to discussing it further on the show, Johnno.
Trevor Wilshire in the live chat says, hello everyone new to the forum, enjoying it so far. Good to have you on board, Trevor. We've had over 50 people watching live for most of the show. So glad to have all of you with us today. And I can assure you we will be talking about these things more and more as the weeks progress, because evidently you can't talk about them anywhere else. And so long as we've got the internet to talk about these things, that's exactly what we're going to do. And again, I understand that for some people, some of the terminology that I use is a little bit extreme for you guys. Don't worry. Once upon a time, it was for me too. I went through the education system. I was programmed to believe that A, multiculturalism is good for everybody, and B, if you question it, you're a racist or a xenophobe. But then I started doing my own research and thinking for myself, and that's how I've arrived at this point today. And let's not forget, our current Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, was involved, along with a cabal from News Corp, Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, to put together the Australians for Honest Politics Trust Fund, which was used to prosecute Pauline Hanson, a political prisoner in this country, who was imprisoned on trumped-up electoral fraud charges, which she was later acquitted for because she'd done nothing wrong other than tick off the Liberal Party. She was getting too popular. Too many people liked her style. If you go and watch her maiden speech to Parliament and you have a single functioning brain cell in your head, you'll understand why she was popular. So what happened? News Corp, Rupert Murdoch, and Tony Abbott, the then Federal Health Minister, got together, got her put in prison to get rid of her. She was a political prisoner. If you think you're free, you've got your eyes closed. And if you think that what's happening to Australia today is in your interests, you've got your eyes closed. It's time for you to open up your eyes. And if enough of us do, don't you worry, we can change it. But to change it, we've got to start speaking out. And I'm so glad this Folks guy did. I'll look into whether or not he's the real deal. But in the meantime, what we have seen is that just by handing out a couple thousand flyers, look at the attention he's been able to attract. That's what we could do. We've got more than 50 people watching live right now. Imagine if everyone here today just handed out 100 flyers in their local. Okay, not everyone watching live right now is in Australia. Suppose we've got 40 people watching from Australia. If every one of us just handed out 100 flyers, we would have handed out more than this guy handed out, and he made the mainstream media. So the power is there, the influence is there, and what they don't want is for us to break the false consensus. Their whole system is built on a false consensus. Every mainstream media outlet, whether it's news paper, whether it's radio, whether it's television, they all have to promote multiculturalism is good, and if you question it, you're bad. They have to promote that because of the false consensus. But we can break that false consensus, and Folks has shown us that. So that's something that we can think about as we move forward. We've got to move forward on the show as well because we're fast running out of time. It's time to get into the international segment right now. The first topic for international segment today, Lindsay, is to do with pro-Palestinian activists being tracked. Take it away. Okay,
thank you for that. This was on the Ford website, and Ford is a Jewish website, on the 27th of May. And the headline read, shadowy website creates blacklist of pro-Palestinian activists. Quote, a new website is publishing the identities of pro-Palestinian student activists to prevent them from getting jobs after they graduate from college. But the website is keeping its own backer's identity a secret. It is your duty to ensure that today's radicals are not tomorrow's employees, a female narrator intones in a slick video posted to the website's YouTube account. Called Canary Mission, the site has posted profiles of dozens of students and recent graduates alongside those of well-known activists like Omar Barghouti, founder of the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Movement. Some of the students are active in Students for Justice in Palestine. Others are involved in recent pro-BDS, that must be the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions, resolutions at campuses in California. Many of them have relatively thin activist resumes. Now, the reason I put that there was, as soon as I read that, I thought, man, that's almost attacking people like you two fellas. I mean, it doesn't worry me because I'm past work. I'll be retiring soon. But you blokes are bright young fellows. You go to get a job, and they pull this on you. Oh, these blokes have run a web podcast, and they dump on Jews. They're anti-Semitic, anti-whatever. And that was my first reaction. I thought this really is more relevant than it's not just constrained to anti-Palestinian pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli activists. It's anybody that disagrees with the mainstream. And I thought of you fellas, and it is a concern to me, and probably for everybody that puts something on this, on the column here, it wouldn't be hard to track them through Google. So everybody that gets involved in this are open to demonisation by this sort of mentality coming from this group. So I'll throw it back to you, Ethan. You're a young fella. You let me know what you think about that.
Yeah, Lindsay, I agree with you. I think, I saw this Canary Mission story through the week, and the first thing that struck to me was the research that I've been doing, and I've brought up in this show a number of times already, is that it will reach this level here in Australia. We're already seeing similarities with climate change courses at the University of Queensland, how to combat climate change denial, how to combat people that think against the system like this. There's a lot of people that I disagree with here in this Sydney about their viewpoints on a lot of things, but I try to show up to pro-Palestinian rallies because anytime I can stick it to Israel about their systematic genocide of an entire race, I try to take that opportunity. But you do see that it's going to come here, and that's as you mentioned, Lindsay. That was the first thing that come into my head. This is not just an isolated specific topic. This is normalizing once again that you need to do this. And I've had experiences where there's been indirect sort of references to my work and whatnot during school. I was denied the school captaincy of my school at the roundtable meetings that they had between the principals and whatnot because they didn't want me as a representative of the school because of my controversial viewpoints and all of this nonsense. So I can see that would also relate to the mainstream getting a job and whatnot. There would be a lot of road barriers for that eventually if they wanted to. So again, this is another isolated incident we've seen through the week, but it all relates back to this larger concept of you need to believe in statism, and if you don't, you're an enemy, and we are going to train you to think that those who do are the enemies. Jono, I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, in my case, if people knew where I worked, they'd understand that the vast majority of the people I deal with are foreigners, many of them fresh off the boat. And if they came and watched me at work, they'd see that I treat all of them very well, and I try to talk to them. Some of them can't speak a word of English, but I try my best anyway. In many cases, I know full well that these people are here. They've been brought here as part of a greater agenda to harm the local population in ways that we've already sort of touched on before. I know full well that these people have been brought here as part of that agenda, but I know that it's not their fault. They're just individuals who've been given a chance to come to Australia, so they've taken the opportunity, and good on them for doing that. So if someone wanted to threaten my job, I'd say to them, good luck, and if they succeeded, if they got me fired from my job, well, I'd walk into Centrelink, cap in hand, and say, give me cash, you bastards, it's your fault in the first place. It would just give me more time to make videos on YouTube. I don't care. I'm kind of over my job anyway. I've been there for a few years. But going back to the topic at hand here, we've got people saying, listen, if you criticize Israel, if you criticize Zionism, we're going to keep a database of you. We're going to track you to make your life harder, to stop you from doing it. Those tactics only work if people bow down. But if enough people say, okay, then do that, keep a database. How big a database can you keep? Can you track 1 million of us? Good luck to you. These things only work if people let them work. And I think I see this all the time, whether it's to do with that documentary that was released a few weeks ago called Hellstorm by Kyle Hunt. You look at the comments underneath that video, people are waking up to what's going on. They're waking up to the fact that they've been completely lied to about Israel and Palestine. They're waking up to the fact they've been completely lied to about World War II in the first place. They're waking up to the lies that have happened, and too many people are waking up far too quickly. So to these people keeping track of this database, it tells us the kind of people that we're dealing with here, and we should understand this isn't all they do. There's also the Jewish Internet Defense League, the JIDL, which does this kind of thing on the internet, trolling and tracking people who criticize Israel. These are the kind of people that we're dealing with. So A, you have to understand that they're out there and these are their plans. But B, you also have to understand that these plans only work if you let them scare you. They're not scaring me. They shouldn't scare you. These people know that they're in a lot of trouble and the days of the lies are numbered. We have to move on to the second topic now, and that is Bill Gates prophesizing a pandemic. Ethan, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Jono. This is an international topic that I thought again would relate, and again it's setting the stepping stones for what we can predict in the future. It was from the Business Insider here in Australia and was linked to through the mainstream media, entitled "Bill Gates just described his biggest fear and it could kill 330 million people in less than a year." Quote, "You would think that Bill Gates, the ever so friendly richest man in the world, aka eugenicist, wouldn't be afraid of much, rather. But as he recently told Ezra Klein at Vox, he does have some major fears for humanity. Quote, "I rate the chance of a nuclear war within my lifetime as being fairly low," says Gates. "However, I rate the chance of widespread epidemic far worse than Ebola in my lifetime as well over 50%. Gates is 59 years old, so that means an outbreak of sorts is coming in the next few decades. It's especially terrifying," Gates says, "given the way that we reacted to the last epidemic. The Ebola breakout of last year showed how unready the world is for dealing with an infectious disease. The last widespread killer epidemic was the Spanish flu between 1918 and 19. It killed between 20 and 40 million people worldwide, more than World War I. What's even more frightening," Gates says, "is that we don't even know where the Spanish flu came from. It was just called the Spanish flu because the president of Spain was the first to report on it. In many ways, we're even more vulnerable to an infectious catastrophe today." Gates tells Vox that according to his modelling, 50 times more people cross borders today than they did back in 1918. Because of that and other factors, Gates estimates the next Spanish flu could kill 330 million humans in 250 days, more than the entire population of the United States. Quote, "We've created, in terms of spread, the most dangerous environment we've ever had in the history of mankind," Gates tells Fox, and then they link to the video where you can watch the full article, and I'll link this to at ozroundtable.com. But the reason I bring this up is 2 weeks ago on the show, we had new biosecurity laws introduced into this country. They passed the levels of parliament here in Australia, and it was based on the notion of suspected diseases, suspected signs of symptoms. You know, we need to prevent diseases by isolating certain cases of people, forcefully, you know, injecting vaccines into them, all of this nonsense that they can do without any just cause. It's just a suspicion, and how that is a threat because of the way that people reacted to the Ebola incident, where the CDC and whatnot were talking about just rounding up citizens to do it, and how the agenda can serve that. And then last week on the show, I rediscovered an article that I linked to at tottnews.com, speaking of Australian science preparing for an epidemic, so for a pandemic rather. So I linked these two together while saying, hang on a minute, we know that the biosecurity law was disrupted by the election that happened in 2013. It's when it was introduced, and this article was introduced at the same time this legislation was. So in my estimation, in my opinion, I saw that either a fake pandemic will come as a justification to round up those select people that they want, again, people that question the system, or B, you know, who knows, it's an off likely chance in my situation that I see in my head, but you know, a real pandemic or the vaccines actually have the disease in them when you go to get them or whatnot, you know, anything like this. But now, again, this is reinforcing that perhaps we're onto something when we identify these articles, because now Bill Gates has come out this week and said that 330 million people in 250 days will die from an upcoming pandemic, and he says that it's well over 50%. Now we know that Bill Gates and his ties to eugenicists, and how he's speaking about how he desires the population of the world to come down to a lower level. So when you've got sick human beings like this who provide vaccines to these third world countries and are killing and paralyzing babies every day, if a sick person comes out and says that there's going to be a pandemic within his lifetime, you know, it's something that you should address and look to where they're going. Now, personally, I'll throw it over to you, Lindsay, first. Personally, I think they'd take more of the route of a fake pandemic. But again, you've just got to watch out for this sort of rhetoric that they spew in the mainstream media, because it's building the pathway for something. What do you think?
Yeah. After I saw that Ebola thing and some of the YouTube videos and what have you, and what a farce it was, and how it's just swiveled up on the vine lately, We've not heard anything about it at all. So this thing that was going to take over the world and was threatening America, suddenly it's just disappeared. And I think that's all it was it was just another psyop. I'm in two minds. I don't trust these people not to release something real, though most of the time they release something, I suspect it's just another fear tactic that they'll try and lay on us. A bit like you're saying, I wouldn't trust Gates. I think he's a crook. I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. But you don't know what else is behind it. Given half a chance, these people will try and release something that will kill us. And I was reading something the other day that apparently the Asians are very upset because they were of the opinion that the SARS virus was designed specifically to target people with Asian genetics, and that's made them really pissed off with the eggs. So there's so many things going on here. It's like all the topics we discussed. So many things going on. I really don't know what the true direction will be. So I just keep it. It's almost like trying to juggle. Just keep all the balls in the air at the same time and see where they, what happens in the end. But I'll throw it to Johnno and see what he's got to say.
Just targeting Asian genes. Lindsay, obviously you haven't been to uni, because if you did, you'd know that race is just a social construct. There's no actual difference between us other than trivial differences of skin color. So I don't know how they could target different genes. It's all just a social construct. In the live chat, Goaways, being more serious here, Goaways says, controversial question, are you guys totally against population reduction? Maybe I'm conditioned, but the planet seems overpopulated to me. That's actually a good question. I say that we discuss that on the Q&A after the show. Of course, this is a 2-hour show. After that, we have a live Q&A with the live chat. So look forward to that. We'll discuss that there. But just a question for you, Ethan. This is from me. Can you tell me, with that article that you read out, how many millions of people did Gates say was at risk? I hate to put you on the spot there, but
330 million people in a year.
330 million people, was it? Yeah. Thanks. I didn't pick up on that when you were reading it out, but Press Reset in the live chat picked up on it. I know we've got a lot of fakeologists in the live chat and in the listeners on delay, and yeah, 33 at the start should make you ask some questions. But I want to discuss all of that and more in the Q&A after the show. So what we'll do is, Ethan, you give me your final thoughts, and then we'll move on to the next topic. All right?
Yeah, there's not much to add, Jono. Just again to the public, we speak about some of these topics that are already in play at the moment, but it's also important to look at these articles and whatnot to project the future direction that they're taking. So in my estimation, they do want to do something like this, whether it's fake or real, and use this pretext under this biosecurity laws to potentially target people. But we definitely have to be concerned. We definitely have to be vigilant of what's happening and spread this amongst friends and family to see that expose the Ebola situation and whatnot for what it is, and just spread the word with people, and we can continue to identify these steps as they happen, Jono.
Yeah, in the live chat, Greg Williams asks, if race is a social construct, how can they determine your race by a blood test? That's a good question, and for asking it, you just failed first-year sociology, buddy. Out you get of university. There's $1,000 down the drain, my friend. Race is just a social construct. That's what they're teaching kids and indoctrinating kids at university, and probably in high schools by now. That's how they do it. They start things at university where you feel so smart and privileged to be getting taught nonsense so you don't question it. Then they start filtering it down through the high schools once those university graduates start becoming teachers. So it wouldn't surprise me if right now in your high school kids are being taught that race is a social construct, but I can tell you for certain that that's what's being taught in universities. And not just taught in universities, they're also being trained to react verbally aggressively to anyone who questions that notion. What a world we live in. We'll discuss more of that in the Q&A. Oh, and another thing too, with the 33, if you're listening to this for the first time and you're not familiar with the significance of the 33, just check out my John LeBon YouTube channel. I've got a video done about that, about the significance of numbers, and 11, 17, 33, all very important numbers. There's my second shameless plug for the episode. Moving on to the third topic of international peace activists at the Korean border. Lindsay, take it away.
Yeah, this was a funny little one, but I thought I'll put it in anyway. People might be interested. Okay, it was in the Courier Mail, page 16, on the 25th of May, and it read just that. Peace activists at Korean border. And I'll quote, Dorasan Station, international women activists, including Gloria Steinem, yesterday were denied an attempt to walk across the demilitarized zone dividing North and South Korea. End of quote. Now, as soon as I saw that name, Gloria Steinem, I started to think, what's behind this? and it's got to be something against our interest. Now that's just me. I'm cynical, but that's the reason I put it in here. I thought maybe the people on our listening panels can help me out here. What do you think was to be gained by her crossing the border? It's got me beaten. All right, I'll throw that back to you, Ethan, and see what you've got to think. Got to say about it.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I don't know. It's an interesting perspective. I think that the entire spectrum of what's happening over in Korea is something that a lot of people don't realize is as complicated as it seems. On one hand, the lies that you're fed, and then on the other hand, questioning yourself whether some of these things do, exist in the first place. So I'm lost for words, Lindsay. I don't have anything to add to that. I'll have to do more research, but I'll throw it over to Johnno to see what he has to say.
Well, the reason, because again, I go through Lindsay's list of topics to discuss every morning, and I pick out the ones that I think are best. And this one piqued my interest for the same reason as it piqued yours, Lindsay, because of Gloria Steinem. Now, many of our listeners will know that Gloria Steinem, along with people like Andrea Dawkins, along with people like 1963 Betty Friedan. There you go. Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan were the leaders of the second wave feminist movement. Friedan in '63 with the Feminine Mystique, and then Steinem in the late 60s with her expose on the Playboy Mansion, what have you, and they were leaders of second wave feminism. We don't have time today for an extensive talk about second wave feminism. Maybe we'll get into that discussion in the Q&A. But of course, what people like Andrea Dawkins, Gloria Steinem, Betty Friedan, and so many others all had in common was that they were Jewish. So many of the leaders of second wave feminism were Jewish. Now, if you don't know the difference between first and second wave feminism, basically in the late 1800s, early 1900s, people were arguing that women should have equal rights under law to men, equal rights to own property, equal rights to vote, these kinds of things, common sense things that very few people would argue with, and everything was okay. And then second wave feminism came along in the 1960s, and people like Betty Friedan with the Feminine Mystique were saying, oh, women, you're being oppressed by raising happy, healthy children at home and keeping a nice house. You're being oppressed by a patriarchal system. You have to go out and get a job. Anyone who says that you're better off at home than getting a job, they're oppressing you. The men are oppressing you, especially the white men are oppressing you. And here we are 50 years later, and our society has been more or less degenerated and destroyed by so many of these second wave feminisms who just, for some reason or another, happen to be Jewish. And then when I saw that article from Lindsay, I had a bit of a chuckle about the idea of peace activists in the first place. But there's our old friend Betty Friedan popping up, and if she's there, you can bet that there's ulterior motives. Lindsay, what do you say?
Yeah. I still can't get to the bottom of it. I know there's got to be something here. I mean, Gloria Steinem, she just doesn't go off to Korea for no reason. There's got to be something there that's hidden from me. So maybe the members of the chat would like to make some suggestions, or maybe they don't know either. But I'll try and investigate it in the weeks to come, because I'm quite interested in this. There's got to be something behind that. Anyway, that'll do me. I don't have any more to say at the moment.
Look, I've got one final point to make on North Korea. If you look into this far enough, you might come to the conclusion that Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il were little more than puppet actors, and the entire North Korea story is just that, a story for PSYOP purposes. Now, what might those PSYOP purposes be? If you look into this for yourself, you might come to your own conclusions, but my conclusion is they use North Korea to tell us, hey, look at how brainwashed other countries are. Look at how brainwashed they are. They all think that their political system's good and that they're all so lucky, but they're all just brainwashed. Not like us Syrian, and they're also they're all slaves. They're not free. Not like us lucky, educated, smart, non-brainwashed, free people. And I've heard people say this like, oh, at least we're not North Korea. Oh, you keep complaining. How would you like to live in North Korea? And then you think, hold on a second, buddy. What do you know about North Korea? Only what the mainstream media tell you. And you shouldn't be trusting them to tell you what temperature it's going to be tomorrow, let alone how things are in another country. I personally suspect the entire North Korea story is a complete psyop to make us, among other reasons, to make us feel lucky for what we have here and to feel scared of a potential dictator who we need our government to save us from, which is exactly like what happens in 1984, George Orwell. It all ties in nicely together. We've got to move on because time is of the essence. Our final topic for today for International, Ethan, is to do with Osama Bin Laden, the conspiracy theorist. Take it away.
Thanks, Johnno, and I'll make this quick. It was just something I'd like to end the show on as a laugh, and I wanted to bring it up over the last couple of weeks, but I wasn't giving it the time of day just because it's just more mainstream rubbish. But I found an article by The Guardian that just really blew my mind, the way it was constructed and the way of how they can get away with this nonsense rhetoric over the past couple of weeks that they've been saying that Osama bin Laden is a so-called conspiracy theorist. I'll read it out and then we can have a general discussion about this to tie the show up. But it's titled 9/11 Truthers Naturally Wary of Osama bin Laden's Conspiracy Theory Obsession. So right off the bat, this is wrote by Alan Uhas in New York for The Guardian. And Alan, you're a disgrace to everything that journalism once stood for, and once we take down this control grid that we have, you will be held accountable for your actions, my friend. But I won't go on a rant.
Sorry.
Quote, I get upset about this, Lindsay.
No, that's all right. That's good.
So, quote, the revelation of the stranger elements of his personal library was dismissed by online theorists as nonsense because he's been dead for nearly 14 years. Obsessed with plots to ruin America, terrified of bugs implanted in tooth fillings or women's clothing, and secluded away from even his confidants, Osama bin Laden may not have been in the most healthy frame of mind during his years in hiding. It should perhaps come as no surprise, then, that his personal library included conspiracy theories about the occult, the Illuminati, and even 9/11. Documents and details released by US intelligence officers on Wednesday from the raid that killed bin Laden in 2011 revealed the Al-Qaeda leader's collection included the new Pearl Harbor disturbing questions about the Bush administration and 9/11. A book that aims to dismantle the official story of the September 11 attacks and alleges that President George Bush was complicit in them. Informed by The Guardian that bin Laden owned a copy of his book, author and retired theologian David Ray Griffin said, "It's a surprise," and that he was at loss for words. "It's such a crazy story," Griffin said. "I'm disappointed that he only had one of my books. He should have read Pearl Harbor Revisited." Griffin's book poses more questions than it does theories about what happened on September 11th, arguing that the 9/11 Commission and the Bush administration distorted the truth for larger geopolitical aims in the Middle East. I don't, quote, "I don't doubt that Osama would have found Griffin's brilliant book really informative," said Jim Fetzer, a founder of Scholars for 9/11 Truth. But Osama died on 15th of December 2001. He was suffering from serious diseases, including a kidney disease, and it's hard to get those dialysis machines in and out of those caves in Afghanistan. So I'm not even going to continue reading this article out. It goes on for ages. It really does. It goes on for ages, and it goes on to, you know, MK Ultra. It goes on to the Illuminati. They even mention that they bring up Alex Jones for the second half of the article, and then they bring up, you know, that Jones has also linked bin Laden to the Illuminati, you know, and Mossad, CIA, M16, and they bring up all of these normalized topics that we generally believe as truths, that, you know, the Mossad and all of these intelligence organizations were involved in 9/11. But this load of complete garbage from The Guardian is being read by thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people once it gets mainstream traction. And first of all, the story is completely fabricated, and you know, the founder, Jim Fetzer, is completely right. I do believe he died in 2001. There was a funeral in the Afghanistan paper for it, and that whole story is fake. This is completely fake, because what are they actually trying to tell people? That someone who reportedly did 9/11 drove himself insane to the point where he had books about 9/11 and that it wasn't him? You know, like, what are they trying to normalize in these people? For me, I took out of it, again, the key words, you know, relating anyone who questions the system to a Bin Laden, to a Nazi, to a Hitler. You know, all of these people that had a different worldview from the state are the enemy. And And they like to do this a lot in articles. They like to bring up truths, so then when it comes up, they do this in movies a lot, when it comes up in discussion, people just dismiss it. You say, well, what about Mossad, et cetera, and they go, oh, in that article, yeah, that article making fun of bin Laden, the crazy one, or yeah, I saw that in that movie. They do this to normalize and to have the programmed masses already receptive to a counter argument. So I'll throw it over to you there first, Lindsay. What do you take on Alan Uhas' disgusting article about bin Laden being a conspiracy theorist and this whole notion that we are envious of Bin Laden's conspiracy theory collection, Lindsay.
Yeah. I've got the same thing here. After reading the Courier Mail for a while, there are a number of the reporters here, but one bloke in particular called Sivert. Paul Sivert? I just can't. I think it's Paul Sivert anyway. But that's his tactic exactly. Exactly what you read out was his tactic. He'll go through all the conspiracy theories in the world, treating them with absolute contempt and dumping on them or what have you, and then having dismissed them, then he'll go on with his mainstream propaganda. And I think, oh, this is brilliant the way they do it. They don't actually discuss it. It's condemn. You don't want to discuss it because that could open up questions then. No, you just condemn it, and then you use your propaganda. So I thought it was brilliant. They use it here all the time. But can I just add one other little point that was in the Courier Mail during the week as well on this matter, and it was that we have an ABC breakfast broadcaster on radio in Brisbane, and he came out and he was upset and said that Bin Laden was actually an honoured and respected sheikh, and he accused the US of smearing his name. And then of course, you know, we can't have that. You can't have an ABC reporter saying something like that. So an ABC spokesman later said that Mr. Austin meant to say Bin Laden was a respected sheikh within his community, and it was not in a personal opinion. So even when you get somebody who's got enough decency to say, you know, this is just absolute bullshit and it's over the top, no, we can't have that. The ABC's got to step in and say, no, So you understand why the mainstream media don't tell us very much truth, is because anybody that's got the guts to stand up gets a whack over the knuckles. But anyway, I'll throw that to Johnno now and see what he's got to say.
Well, yeah, it's worth remembering that the official story with Osama Bin Laden was that he was one of the Mujahideen who were funded by the US State Department or the CIA, one of these groups, back in the 1980s to fight the Soviets. So it's a classic case of George Orwell's 1984, that we've always been at war with Eurasia, except for when we were at war with East Asia. But you're supposed to forget the previous one. Eurasia, East Asia, one day you're an enemy, one day you're a friend. You're meant to forget about the rest. And most people, they're so stupid, they don't even know about the part. Like the official story, I'm not saying the official story is at all legitimate. I think the whole thing's fake. But even if you believe the official story has been changing, and for them to still be going along with that nonsense Osama Bin Laden story, especially when they've now got their ISIS story up and running, and most fools seem to believe that, why are they rehashing the Osama Bin Laden stuff? In fact, Ethan, what was the date on that article, if you don't mind me asking?
The 21st of May, Johnno.
So that's from May 2015. So even when they've got their next boogeyman up and running, and ISIS is flying now, like most of the masses believe that nonsense story, why are they still rehashing Osama Bin Laden? That's anyone's guess. And I think the live chat, they've had a good laugh about it. It is all a good laugh, and it's a good way to finish a show. It is time to wrap it up now, boys. So what we'll do is we'll go around for our final thoughts, remembering, of course, we've got the Q&A straight afterwards. But for episode 34B on 31st May 2015, boys, time to wrap it up. Lindsay, what are your final thoughts?
I think it was a good rundown on different topics. It's allowed us to go off in different directions, because all of these topics, they all seem to have the same theme. They're all working together. We talk about an octopus with all the tentacles, and it seems to be exactly that. We keep getting all these different articles about different things, but when you look at it, it's only one tentacle of the octopus. And I think today's episode has proved it again. I'm quite happy about what we've done today, and I feel that we're starting to make inroads into these people. I don't think they can keep going with this bullshit too long. Even the fact that an ABC bloke came out against them, it's a sign of people are just getting to the stage of having a gut full of this rubbish. We're not that stupid. You know, it's all right lying to us, but don't expect us to believe your lies. You know, that sort of attitude. But anyway, I'll just see what Ethan's got to say.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I think going back to that, I was going to bring up just the theme of this episode, and the theme has always been, in this episode particularly, that we mention every week, is that they are training the masses to see us as the enemy, and once we are the enemy, that's when it becomes very troubling times. And to end, I just wanted to relate back to this Bin Laden article. It starts off with this nonsense story about, all of this rubbish about what he had in his collection. Then in the center of the article, it speaks about people that have actually been speaking the truth about this topic, writers and whatnot. Then at the end, it brings up, as you said, Lindsay, every single conspiracy theorist in history. There's a quote that says, the Al Qaeda leader's taste in right-wing perspectives on conspiracy did not end with Springmeier. He also had a copy of The Secrets of the Federal Reserve, a book by Holocaust denier Mullins, who during his life shared anti-Semitic sentiments with Ezra Pound and wrote an article in praise of Hitler. So right there, they hit Federal Reserve, Holocaust denial, praise of Hitler, anti-Semitism. And it's not what you think about the actual characters that write this. It's that they are. Then it goes on to CIA's MK Ultra, and it's all normalizing, because whenever these topics are going to be brought up in mainstream society, people will reject them. So this episode has been, look at the propaganda, analyze it for yourself, spread the discussion points, and then spread it out amongst critical thinkers and like-minded people alike in this community and around the world to see that this is what's coming, and if we don't address it now, it could be too late. My final thoughts is I wanted to give a big shout out to radfm.com for, we had our debut on the Australian Roundtable Podcast, had a debut Friday from 4 p.m. that we're going to be on Friday from 4 p.m. from now on every time on ratfm.com. A specific shout out to the Know Your Rights show with Mike and Brenton. It goes from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. every Tuesday on radfm.com. You can tune in and stream live. And I listened in live to their show, and they had some fantastic things to say about this show, and gave us a big shout out on the show, as they told me they plan to do every week, because they love the work that we're doing. And likewise, I want to promote their work, because I've gone back through their history of their catalog and their 40 episodes they've done so far, and it's so far fantastic stuff. And I know a lot of our listeners would resonate with the information that they are spreading about fundamental rights that you still have, how to beat all of these things. And then they also talk about the agenda that we talk about as well. So big shout out to radfm.com. I've got new articles at tottnews.com for people to check out if you want. And other than that, thank you for everyone for tuning in, Johnno.
Good stuff, mate. Well, just a few final thoughts from me. And again, listeners, stick around. Q&A starts in a few minutes. First up, Podbean. Now, we've had our Podbean account, which is where we upload the official shows as MP3 files for you to download for free. We've had that for a couple of months now, and over the last month, we're averaging just over 100 downloads per episode, which I'm very happy with, because that means that a decent percentage of our listeners are downloading the MP3. But I'd love to get that percentage higher. And it's been made even easier now, because we're now on iTunes. So if you search for the Australian Roundtable Podcast on iTunes, you can subscribe to us through iTunes. Now, I don't personally use iTunes. I had to download it as part of getting our iTunes account set up. I don't personally use it, but if you do, you can now subscribe to us through iTunes. And again, if you don't have that, you can subscribe to us through our RSS feed, and all of the episodes are available on our site, ozroundtable.com. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I'd love to see more people downloading the show via the MP3 files. And one of them is because the more people who download the episodes, the more copies there are out there. And I once upon a time had my two backup hard drives, both failed in the space of a couple of weeks. Like, I used them once, a couple of weeks later, they both failed. And the chances of me losing all of my files and the Podbean account at the same time, obviously they're pretty slim, but the more people have copies on their computers, the happier I feel. So check them out. They're about 80 megabytes each. Download the episodes, keep them on your hard drive. Please, as a favor to me, download them. They're free. And like I said, you can subscribe to us through iTunes. The second final thought, I know most of you know this, but we did an interview with Aussie Beach TV a couple of months ago, which they've finally uploaded. And since our listeners can sometimes listen one week and not listen another week, if you're not aware, if you just go to Aussie Beach TV on YouTube or AussieBeachTV.com, you'll see myself and Ethan on camera doing an interview with the people from Aussie Beach TV. They were a lot of fun. It was plenty of fun to do the episodes. Hopefully you enjoy them as well. And it's good to support other people doing independent work. There's not many people in Australia doing independent work. So even though the Aussie Beach crew do their shows very differently to how we do ours, they're still trying to get the truth out there. So try and support them, Aussie Beach TV. Next of all, make sure you check out, this is my third and final shameless plug for today, make sure you check out my channel, John LeBon. I've got a few videos up there, including an update on the Sydney siege, and I've got evidence of the media admitting that they started that entire flower memorial. They've admitted it. They've put their foot in it. So go and check it out on John LeBon. I've got a 15-minute video exposing those jokers. It was all one big psyop. Australian Media Skeptics. I've started a Google community. I haven't really been using my Google Plus account at all. I only had one because you have to have one when you start a YouTube channel. But I've decided it might be time to start one. So I've started one called Australian Media Skeptics, and I'd love it if particularly Australian media skeptics or fakeologists could start joining that so we can share each other's work, because the more of us presenting or producing the content, the better, and that'll be a good way to share the content. So please check out Australian Media Skeptics on Google Plus, and if you can't find it, just Skype me and I'll send you a link. I'd love to have like a hub for Australian truthers or media skeptics or critical thinkers or whatever you want to call yourself, a place where we can all share our content. That's Australian Media Skeptics. And finally, for those who aren't aware, I was on Fakeologist just over a week ago with Kaham, and you can find the episode on fakeologist.com. They do their stuff very differently to us. They believe that, you know, the JFK assassination was a hoax. They believe that Bill Gates isn't really a billionaire, he's just an actor. They believe that Richard Branson's just an actor. They're very much on the fringe of this kind of work, but it's always good to test out your own beliefs and your own theories with people who you disagree with. That's the whole idea. So go and check out fakeologist.com. Support them. I think Ab's doing great work. That's enough final thoughts for me. We're going to a Q&A right now. Thank you so much. We've had between 50 and 60 live listeners right throughout the episode. We're up to over 60 right now. Thank you to everyone for coming out. The comment section has been terrific again today. I hope I read out enough to keep you all happy today. I didn't read out many last week, but hopefully we got enough out today. I want to say thanks to everyone who's listening on delay, either on YouTube or on MP3. We really appreciate it. Keep spreading the word, and hopefully we can continue to grow the show. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Ethan. I'll see you on the Q&A, but for the 31st of May 2015, episode 34B, this is the Australian Roundtable Podcast. We'll catch you next week.